dismantling the idea that everybody has bootstraps. Like, and I've heard this a lot recently. The funny thing about lift yourself up by your bootstraps, it was actually an expression created to say that's an impossible thing to do. Like, you can't, you literally, if your feet are in shoes, you can't lift yourself up. So it's an impossible scenario.
Welcome to On Brand with Donny Deutsch. I am Donny Deutsch, which would make me the host of On Brand. And On Brand is the podcast that we do kind of the same things every week. We, first of all, our premise is that everything is a brand. Every person, every celebrity, every athlete, every politician, every company, every product, every institution, every political party, all brands. Brand is a set of values. And what we do here is two things. We first do a big individual brand interview about somebody's personal brand. Today is Kamau Bell. He is a visionary guy. He is the host of United Shades of America, a huge hit on CNN. He's got a new book out that we're going to talk about, all about race. It's a great interactive book. He did an amazing documentary series on Bill Cosby. Say we need to talk about Bill Cosby. Just one of the most important voices about race today in this country, and a really entertaining comedic fellow. In addition to being brilliant, he is funny as hell. And we do what we call our brands of the week. And these are the brands that are shaping what's going on in the world, what's driving the zeitgeist, who's up, who's down. And let's get right to our brands of the week. First brand of the week is brand down for Trump money, for Trump fundraising. This is interesting. This will tell you a lot. Obviously, Trump has recently said that hasn't announced when or hasn't announced if. But he has announced, he's not announcing when, but it doesn't seem like there's an if as far as he's going to run again. And his fundraising is slowing down. Trump's political committee raised about $18 million between April and June. That's $2 million less than the prior 3 months. In the same 6-month period last year, Trump collected more than $56 million in online donations and raised $51 million from July through December of 2021. And what's interesting, it puts him behind DeSantis, who raised $45 million in the first 6 months of this year. So that tells you a lot. And, we obviously, we see in the polls that almost half of Republicans would rather Trump not run. I think 49%. It's either 49% or 51%, but it's about 50-50 that don't want to see him run. So I've said this in many forms on the show that the Trump grip on the party, although still firm, is loosening dramatically. Brand down for Trump voters in red states. Here you go. Here's what you need to know. More Trump voters in red states say secession would make things better. Red state Trump voters are now more likely to say they'd be personally better off than worse off if their state seceded from the U.S. and became an independent country. So there you go. Folks down in Mississippi and Arkansas are saying Trump voters are like, we'd actually be better off as an independent country of Mississippi than part of this nation. We'll see how that works on your taxes and things like that, and when you don't get roads built and little things like that. Amazing. Those are the Trump voters in red states. There you go. Brand down for, here's a genius, Brad TSCHIDA. He is a GOP lawmaker in Montana. And he said this, quote, "The womb has no specific purpose to a woman's life or well-being." There you go. And we wonder why Roe v. Wade is going backwards. I don't know what to say about that. Here's an interesting thing that's surprising. Gen Z actually hates working from home. Now, Gen Z, this is the young professionals. They're kind of the youngest group out there. They're newly out of school, often without an established network of friends, and they depend on their work for their social lives. Less than 25% of 20-somethings who could do their jobs remotely want to do so full-time. 29% of employees in their 30s want to work remotely full-time. 33% in their 40s want to work remotely full-time. And 41% in their 50s and 60s want to work remotely full-time. So the young people, which you would think are the ones who are entitled and they don't want to be in the workplace and all of the other kind of stuff, they miss it. They understand what they're missing not being in the workplace. And I think that's just an interesting statistic. Brand down or brand up, I don't know how you look at it, for Manhattan apartments. The average rent in Manhattan jumped to a record $5,000 a month. So this is insane. I mean, particularly if you don't live in New York and you're listening to this. Now, $5,000 a month, this is not like, oh, wow, okay, some really expensive apartment. This is the average amount, okay? It's up nearly from 30% ago, 30% from a year ago. So rents are up 30%. And a lot of this lately is that mortgage rates now are starting to really climb, and a lot of people don't want to buy, but that's insane. $5,000 a month for your average New York City apartment. Wow. Brand up for North Carolina. By putting partisanship aside, North Carolina ranks #1 in America's top states for business with the nation's strongest economy. It's really interesting. And one of the reasons is that basically when you had the Democratic governor, Roy Cooper, signing a deal in March with Vietnamese electrical vehicle maker VinFast to build a $2 billion factory in the state, both the state Senate President Phil Berger and House Speaker Tim Moore, both Republicans, were involved and close at hand, and both sides know they have to work together. Now, North Carolina is ahead in so many ways. Their economic growth at 6.7% and job growth was 3.6%, were among the strongest in the nation. The state ranks #2 behind California in access to capital. They've got the nation's second and sixth largest banks. They've got a divided government, but it works. And they are first. Second is Washington, state of Washington. Virginia's third, Colorado fourth, Texas fifth. And the last place as far as good for business, I guess they are on the whipping end of our show today, Mississippi. There you go, Mississippi, not the business capital. Brand up for Bill Gates. He wants to get off the list of the world's wealthiest people, pledged to give away his wealth. He's been giving away an average of $9 billion a year. He's worth $114 billion. He says he just wants to give all his money away. And of course, the foundation started, it was the Warren Buffett, and he also thanked famed billionaire investor Warren Buffett for his longtime contribution to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Said his incredible generosity is a huge reason why the foundation has been able to be so ambitious. Warren Buffett famously said he was giving 90% of his money to the Bill and Melinda Gates because their foundation, he really believes they know how to give it out. There are 200 billionaires across the country who have kind of did their have agreed to give the majority of their wealth away before they die. And frankly, every billionaire should do that. But who am I to say? I'm not a billionaire. I do well, but I'm not a billionaire. Brand up for Kris Jenner. Kris Jenner joined the master class to teach a course on personal branding. This is interesting, obviously very relevant for the show, but, you know, obviously master class are some of the smartest people in the world who give master classes on everything business related, in so many different areas, culture related, politically related. And basically they chose as a branding expert on personal branding, Kris Jenner, because the brands that she's built for her daughters, and very good selection. I would like to know about building a personal brand from Kris Jenner. Brand up for, well, take a guess. What decade do you think is the most popular decade for music? And this is based on data shared by Luminate with Axios Magazine. And it's the 90s. Here, there was also a survey showing the Americans who say they listen to music from each decade. 15% said they listened from the 50s or earlier. 29% said they listened from the 60s. 43% listened to the 70s. That's my area. 55% listened to music from the 80s. And 60% respondents listen to music from the 90s, 53 from the 2000s, 48 from the 2010s, and 57% listen to music from the 2020s. So the 90s, because it's a rare point of cross-generational consensus with Gen Xers, Millennials, Zoomers, all agree they love 90s music. So there it is, 90s music is the most popular music, according to this research. Okay, huge brand up for Beavis and Butthead. Series is getting a Paramount Plus premiere date. They're bringing back Beavis and Butthead. What else do I need to say? I mean, that's culture. That's who we are. I mean, this is not Brideshead Revisited or Masterpiece Theater, but it is Beavis and Butthead, and we need Beavis and Butthead more than ever. So they're bringing back Beavis and Butthead. This is really cool. Brand up for Lego. Lego unveils the new office set based on the classic sitcom. So it's basically a Lego set up as the Office playset. Michael Scott, Pam, Jim, Angela, Dwight, and 10 more of the beloved sitcom's recurring characters, except for Andy, who Lego said is working on his management skills, have been Lego-fied. Toy makers include the world's Kevin Spilled Chili, Dwight's Stapler and Jell-O, and Scott's World Best Mug. The plastic employees are set in Dunlop Mifflin's most visited offices, including the lobby, the conference room, and Scott's office. Michael Scott, played by Steve Carell, clutches his plastic World's Best Mug. The set retails for $119 and we sold to Walmart and Lego sites. There you go. And brand down for culture, American culture as we know it. Addison Rae dolls are coming. That's right. Addison Rae on TikTok fame launches a toy and doll line at Walmart. She's got 88 million followers on TikTok. And now there will be, she did a Netflix movie, and more is coming out with a new line of dolls and toy insider reports. Look, These are the new celebrities. They're not making, dolls of movie stars anymore. They're making dolls of TikTok stars. Addison Rae dolls. Be sure to run out and get one. A huge brand down. This one, hope you're not eating your breakfast. Armpit hair is back, and I give it a brand down. Whether you like it or not, this is according to Wall Street Journal. It's still Vogue's August cover featuring Emma Corrin of the Crown is first featured to feature a non-binary person, and likely it's first to show armpit hair. The actor uses the they, them pronouns, drives a growing number of female and non-binary people who flaunt armpit hair. Miley Cyrus, Lords Leon, a bunch of others. In 2019, Harper's Bazaar article model Emily Ratajkowski wrote that sometimes letting my body hair grow out is what makes me feel sexy, and appeared in lingerie with visible armpit hair. It's trickling down to the masses. I say no. I say we're going backwards. One more way, we are going backwards as a society. I do not think, and I don't want to hear that I'm sexist, I just don't think armpit hair on women is very attractive. That's me, one guy's opinion. Come get me, do what you may, but there you go. But it seems to be coming back, and I give it a brand down. Brand up for 3D billboards. Netflix, this is really interesting. Picture this. Netflix Resident Evil series unveils a terrifyingly realistic digital billboard to celebrate the release of Resident Evil. They have a billboard that shows off one of the fearsome monsters known as Licker. Licker appears to be unhappy about being trapped in a digital ad and can be seen trying to break glass in order to get out. Eventually, the frightening monster makes it out of the ad and appeals to scare the wall of the building before lashing his tongue out at the passing crowd. As long as it's not on a highway and you're not watching in your car and you drive off the road, it's fine. I like it. As long as it's a billboard in a pedestrian area. I don't know about this one. I'll just say it. I don't know if it's a brand or brand down. It's brand neutral, because I can't decide on using AI to chat with the dead. New product that lets people keep relatives alive via AI proliferating. They say, an interactive conversation with a recently departed dad, or took the time to record a video interview before he passed. It's a tool called StoryFile, which is notably used in late actors Ed Asner's memorial service. What it is it's a long, lengthy interview that somebody does before they die, all kinds of question and answers, and then you can ask a user, ask them questions. I don't really understand it, but I don't know about talking to dead people with artificial intelligence. I don't know. Can't decide. I really, really can't. Brand up for nap boxes in Japan. Listen to this one. Offices in Japan install nap boxes so workers can sleep standing up. It's not like a nap pod. Sleepy at work, just stand inside the windowless box and take a power nap. That's the pitch from two Japanese companies that have unveiled a nap box designed to encourage a healthier office culture. The device, which resembles a sleek water heater, will support occupants' heads, knees, and rears, so it will not fall over, according to the outlet. The plan is to install boxes in offices so workers can take their short power naps throughout the day. Many Japanese companies requires office workers to work 80 hours of overtime each month, so this helps. And a huge brand down for BMW. BMW owners outraged, justifiably so, over $18 a month charge to use heated seats. Now, heated seats are installed in the car, but in order to use the heated seats, you have to pay $18 a month to turn on the heated seats that are already installed in our vehicles. Brand down for BMW. And those are our brands of the week. And let's get to our interview. This is a great one, guys. Kamau Bell. Take a listen. I am thrilled to today's guest. This introduction is going to take a while because this guy's got a lot going on, okay? And we're going to do some work today, and you'll understand what I mean when I get to the title. Kamau Bell is becoming a household name. He has got his brand new book that is just out, Do the Work, an Antiracist Activity Book, with Kate Schatz. We're going to do some of those activities today. The 7th season of the 5-time Emmy Award-winning United Shades of America just debuted on CNN. He's got a bunch of podcasts. His first 3 books, The Awkward Thoughts of W. Kamau Bell, Tales of a this one says it all, 6'4" African American, heterosexual, cisgender, left-leaning, asthmatic, black and proud, blurred, mama's boy, dad, and stand-up comedian. He's also written Everybody Loves Kamau, The Real Thing collection, and his new book is out. So this is your 4th book, 3rd or 4th book?
I mean, this is technically it's my second. That other thing was just an essay and a bigger thing.
Okay,
so, yeah,
okay,
but,
all right. So, welcome, sir. A lot to talk about. Thanks for being here. I'm a big fan.
Thank you for having me. I know you don't know this, but we ate Italian food a table apart years ago in Long Island.
And Long Island, where there must have been either. Do you remember the name of the restaurant?
I mean, it was like, I don't remember the name of the restaurant. It was filming United Shades, and we were out there, and I was like, "That's Donny."
Why didn't you come over and say hi? Are you kidding me?
Because I don't. First of all, I never think anybody knows who I am.
By the way, I'm surprised I didn't notice you because a 6'4" black man somewhere in Roslyn, Long Island, definitely would have popped. So I mean,
no, I keep my head down, even though I know how to be inconspicuous. But we were like a table apart. Yeah.
How's it going, man? Did you ever kind of think you'd be here? I mean, you in all the interviews I read with you, you have this very humble, self-aware, like, wow, what this is not supposed to be happening to me.
I mean, to me, I've been saying this more and more over the last year with everything going on in my career, but like, and also the world. I was literally a kid watching Eddie Murphy on SNL going, I want to do that. Like, that was my only dream, was to like be a comedian and be funny. And Eddie Murphy, who is older than me, but at the time he was like 19. So I was like, he's basically the same age as I am. I can do that. So to think that like I thought that was the dream and to end up in this place, it's just like I love the fact that my career doesn't make any sense, but it does actually work.
How did United Shades come about?
You know, I had another TV show, short-lived, called Totally Biased, where it was like sort of a Daily Show style attack on the news, but heavily race-based. And it's funny, now those shows exist a lot, but back then it was The Daily Show and Colbert, and that was it. The Colbert Report. So that show did not last long. And then CNN had just brought in Anthony Bourdain, Lisa Ling.
Jeff Zucker was starting to do the long form.
He was starting to bring. They had debuted original series, but they had never built one from the ground up. And so somebody had sold them on this idea, but they didn't have a host for it. And so I was brought in after the pilot was sold. So it was sort of like I was lucky in that position of like. And then every year I've worked to put it more in my voice. So it's been a process.
Now my friend Chris Lick is not going to fuck this up, is it? Because I'm reading all about well, CNN's going to go straight down the middle now, and they don't want to be opinion, and which, by the way, and I've said this on the show before, is going to be a recipe for ratings disaster. Like unfortunately, we have come to the place now where people want it the way they want it, and just the game of straight news on cable television is just not something that people, good, bad, or indifferent, is just not what people want.
I mean, I'll say this, like the neighborhood that my show lives in has changed dramatically. Yeah. And some of that is tragically because for years, my show followed Parts Unknown with Anthony Bourdain. Yeah. It was like the perfect, like, sort of combination of like, if you like this, you'll also like this. And, you know, I got to film an episode of Parts Unknown with him, and it was one of the greatest experiences of my professional career. And on United Shades, I work with many people who worked on Parts Unknown, which has been one of the second greatest things of my career. But, you know, the new season of United Shades, I followed Patagonia. And so it's like, do you like nature documentaries? I do. Do you like a black guy yelling about racism? I don't know.
Might need to relook at that lead-in. Before we get to the book, just a little more in United Shades, I saw a clip from the new season, which my mouth is still dropped open, where you got interviewing a teacher, and the teacher could not come out and say, yes, I should say slavery is a bad thing in school, that I got to kind of really stay neutral on this slavery. I know you asked her about where do we come out on Nazis, and she still kind of wouldn't kind of come down on either side there.
No. I mean, I think for me, that was like when they said teachers shouldn't say slavery is bad. I was like, okay, now I'm going to give them, I was like, I can't believe you said that, but I'm going to give you a layup now. I'm going to say Nazis. Like that should be very clear. We're not debating that, are we? And when she said not Nazis are bad either, I was just like, oh my God. My laugh was a laugh of like, oh, we're doomed. So 7 seasons, dozens of episodes. If you were going to kind of wrap it up and say, okay, beyond everything we know and don't know and read, and my take on where I see, it's so stupid to say the state of racism in America right now, but let me put it another way. What have you learned? That America is very much a work in progress. That it is not. I think a lot of people thought America was finished, and probably like if you think of America as like, you know, people who work on their cars and their front lawns, I think a lot of people thought this car was ready to hit the streets, and really this car is heavily up on blocks right now. And I think it's debatable whether or not it gets on the road and hums along again. I think it's weird. I think, and the more we sort of understand that, the better we are. Those of us especially want to be on the right side of history, that it is, we can't take anything for granted. We can't take, because it's, as we've learned in the last few weeks with the Supreme Court, like, we're now at the point of like where stripping rights away from people is actually seen as a good thing by powerful forces in this country.
Talk about a work in progress. Where did you come out? I found it fascinating, Bill Maher's take, when he kind of went after progressives, that he kind of said, look, there's so much to be done. And this wasn't about race in particular, it was about any progressive issue. And there was so much to be done, but we also at the same time have to kind of step back and go, maybe we're getting some things right along the way also. And I'm just curious in that, far from a victory lap, but this kind of sense of, hey, let's at least recognize some good things are happening. I'm just curious your take on that.
I think for me, and I even when I started to think this way, to me that sounds like the statement of a person who isn't worried about where their next mortgage payment is coming from.
I hear you.
I mean, so for me, it's like that there are people who live who don't have to be that worried, because no matter how bad the country gets, if you're at a certain level of wealth, you're going to be able to figure it out. I mean, if you look at like Venezuela, there's people in the streets fighting over water, but there's a certain level of wealth in Venezuela where they're not worried about it. So I think that the same thing happens here, is that we are like in a position of like, if you start to say things like that, to me, it becomes like, who are you having conversations with regularly? Because that to me reveals, and if you see the Bill Maher show, you can see who he's having conversations with regularly. And I'm like,
basically white guys.
I would love to get,
very highly educated white people, right?
Yeah, I would love to get Lori Bertram Roberts, who is the executive director of the Mississippi Reproduction Freedom Fund, who is doing the work to get mostly Black and brown women from states that don't have abortions to states that do have abortions, and they're giving them places to stay and da-da-da. Like, I would love to see that person having that conversation with Bill Maher, because I think they would give him they would hopefully give him a different perspective. But I think, to me, when I hear people say, like, things aren't as bad as we think they are, you're not talking to the people who are actually on the front lines of how bad things are.
Racism is a word that gets thrown at a lot of things. And one thing that I have found in my travels is the amount of soft racism that's out there. The obvious stuff, the white supremacy, the skinhead, all the stuff that we see. But I know a lot of people who consider themselves, great purveyors of equality or whatnot. But there's just a softer racism in there. And talk to me about when you hear those words. Give me an example of, I come across so many people that think they are so evolved and so far from racist, but blank. Fill in that blank for me. And because I always say to myself, Jesus Christ, I think I'm as progressive as can be, and I spend my media life on air trying to be on the right side of things and get people to see things on the right side of things. But what are the areas you've come across where even the evolved are not evolved, and that you just go, no, you may think so, you may think you're getting it, but you're not getting it. And which is kind of a lot of the essence of what the new book is about in certain ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I think about, there's so many different ways you can go into this. If you look at America's, like where America ranks across the world as education, like how educated our country is and how educated our students are, you look, we should be number one because we have the resources and we have the ability to sort of to give every kid in this country the same high level quality education. And we don't, and because we don't, the kids who are most affected are Black and brown kids. So if you're thinking like, I put my kids in a good school, they're getting good education, I'm happy. And I'm not talking about critical race theory. I'm talking about, we can talk about that too.
Yeah.
I'm talking about math, science, I think, the basics. And also understanding that like some kids who go to school every day, the first thing the school has to do is feed them, because they did not get a meal at home because their parents did not have the food to feed them. So for me, I think about education as a very clear way in which people think they're only looking at their kids and how their kids are doing, and they forget to look at like, what are the kids in the greater community doing? What are the kids in this country doing? So for me, education is a clear revealer of clear systemic racism in this country based on the educational outcomes and what it in the, we can go to school to prison pipeline, so many things. But the idea being that, like, I think that's just so clear, a clear indicator of structural racism.
My first observation about when I got to college, I went to a high school. I went to a high school in the 70s, Martin Van Buren High School in Queens. I went to Penn, by the way. You didn't make it through, but we'll talk about that a little bit. They threw your ass out,
Although some of the people who made it through, you kind of wonder
about.
Yeah,
one of them was a president of our country. Exactly. So yeah, there are some real prizes that have come through Penn, particularly Wharton. But my high school, Martin Van Buren High School, was about 4,000 or 5,000 kids. It was right in the heart of busing. This was 1973. Kids were being bussed in from Jamaica, Queens. And what was interesting, and I went to a fully integrated high school. Now, integrated is a funny word because all the black kids were in one entrance, the white kids were in another entrance. Yep. They really didn't have to, and the black kids didn't want to be there, and the white kids were kind of like, who are all these people? But it wasn't fighting and whatnot. It was just still segregated. It was weird. But the difference is when I got to college, and a lot of my friends who grew up in Greenwich, Connecticut, or Roslyn, Long Island, or Chevy Chase, Maryland, or whatever, who just had no exposure to people of color, that they approached. I remember I'd be walking down the street and, 7 or 8 black guys would be walking by and I could just feel the tensing up of kids I was with because they just fucking hadn't been around it. And just how much of that is the basis of race issues, that there's still basic segregation in so many ways of our society.
I mean, I think a lot of this is like, I think the thing that's so interesting about this country is that, first of all, it's too many. It should probably be several countries. If you're in Europe, this much land mass is broken up into dozens of countries, not one country. So, but I think what that does, it means is like, you feel completely disconnected from parts of this country you've never been to before. And so it means that and then embedded in that, which I think is you start to see happening, is that people think their version of the country is the preeminent version of the country. And you're doing it wrong in your area of the country. So even if I'm struggling in Appalachia, those black people on the south side of Chicago don't know what they're doing. Even if I'm having a hard life in Appalachia. So it means that instead of looking out to that person on the south side of Chicago and being like, how are our lives the same? Oh, we both have bad schools. We both don't have enough job opportunities. We both want our communities to be safer. Instead of doing that, you're going like, no, they're doing it wrong, which is why they don't have what they want. But I'm really suffering because I'm being oppressed. Yeah. So I think that's the thing I notice is that people just really get sort of xenophobic about their own area of the country. And it becomes more about the team sports of this thing as opposed to we all live in the same place. We should all have access to the same things. And so, I think that I live in the Bay Area of California, lived in Berkeley for a while. The only place I've ever been asked to leave somewhere because I was black was Berkeley, California.
Really?
So I think the other thing is that a lot of us get caught up in our zip codes and being told that if you live in the right zip code in the Bay Area, then you're already a progressive. When literally there's a lot of the soft racism you're talking about or implicit bias happens in places like Berkeley, California.
You, speaking about places, you moved around, you were a lot of places, but you really identify, and I don't know how much that's to do with your father, not with Mobile, Alabama, as far as kind of all the places that kind of defined you. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I mean, I just said this to somebody the other day, Mobile is the place I've been going the most consistently throughout my life. So I was born in East Palo Alto, shout out Little Nairobi. Grew up but then moved to Indianapolis where my mom was from because she wanted to go home and take care of her mom. So we lived in Indianapolis till I was 4. Then I moved to Boston with my mom. We lived there from 4 to 12. Then she moved to Chicago. I was I'm tired of moving. I moved to Alabama for 2.5 years. I was what was I thinking? I moved back to Chicago and then Penn for 1.5 years and then out to the Bay Area where I've basically been since. So throughout all that moving, every year or so, I'm in Mobile, Alabama. For a while, every summer as a kid. So as much as a kid, I was sort of maybe annoyed by it. Why do I come down here? It's whatever, blah, blah, blah. After I got to be about 25 years old, I'm oh, this is one of the few places in the country I come back and feel I know all these streets. I know all these people, and it's also my dad, all of my dad's side of the family is there. So there's 100-year-old black women who've known me my entire life. You know what I mean? It's just there's just a sense of
home.
And they still talk to me like I'm 6. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's
there's a comfort food in that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then on top of that is when I think I saw especially when Trump was elected, there was a lot of blame to go around, and a lot of that blame fell on the South by people who'd never spent a day in the South. And so I was just I suddenly got very Southern pride, not the Confederate flag version of it, but most of you don't know that I consider that to be one of my homes, and so I'm going to claim it and put my dad on TV and be this is what Southern pride is. This is what it is to be a nice Southern gentleman, my father.
A little more before we get to the book. I didn't talk about that in the introduction, but your work on Showtime on Let's Talk About Cosby, the 4-part docuseries, Bill Cosby, was stunning. Stunning in that what I had never really thought, understood, is his profound effect on black culture. And I don't say black culture, on the meshing of Black culture into mainstream culture in this country, and the kind of contradiction of this beast, this animal, in one form, and we've seen this more and more in public people, yet this brilliant trailblazer in another, and that those two kind of lived within the same human being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm at the age where when I was born, Bill Cosby was already like everywhere I looked on my television as a kid. Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids, public television. You know, he's on late night TV. My mom's watching him. So he is just, there's albums are coming out. He is just everywhere. And it's just picture pages. So, and the Cosby Show for me was one of those, like, you know, seminal moon landing experiences where you're like, I know where I was there every week. I thought I was a member of the family. And so I think that we can all love that show, but there's a certain generation of Black folks who are like, no, I was that show.
Yeah.
Even if I didn't have a father who was a OBGYN and a mom who's a lawyer and a nice brownstone, even if I didn't have their money, but my life felt Black like that, you know? And so I think for me to become a comedian, to actually sort of feel like I learned the lesson of Bill Cosby, you have to do good in the world, not just on stage. And then to find out what we all found out, and to find out how pervasive his criminality was, and the sexual assaults and the rapes. It's just like, how do I reckon with this? And I think a lot of us were reckoning with that, especially Black people of a certain generation were reckoning with it, but there was no public place to reckon with it.
Yeah.
Without being shouted down by defenders or people, or there was no way to invite people to a larger conversation about it. And I got fortunate enough that, like, this started out as a conversation in a production company, Boardwalk, with Andrew Freed and Jordy Wynn. And we almost accidentally were like, I think there's a project here. And little did we know what we were getting ourselves into.
What took, beyond all the disgusting stuff with women, what I took away, what just kind of stuck with me was, obviously Cosby was so breakthrough as far as the Cosby Show, is that the first time it showed a Black family not in a stereotypical, either in a project or something. And that was not 1953, it was 1984. It took till 1984 to get. That was 35 years ago. That was not 100 years ago. That was another era in time. That was Ronald Reagan as president. Ronald Reagan in his second term as president, you know. 8 years, we had Bill Clinton 8 years later. So this is not ancient history. And it took until that point in time. That what kind of just jumped out at me.
I think for me, the thing, and we didn't really get into this because it was just that we only had 4 hours. We wanted it to be longer, but I was lucky to get the 4 hours we got since I was a pre-untested director. But, like, the way in which, because I think if you think about, like, the Jeffersons, I'm sure you remember the TV show The Jeffersons.
How can you not?
Yeah, so that show is great, first of all, but it's all about how his wealth doesn't fit into his wealth.
Yeah.
How he's always acting, quote unquote, inappropriately, and how he's always an outsider in his wealth.
Yes.
And the thing about the Cosby Show, it was about how comfortable they were in their success and how nobody was knocking them off. There was no threat that they were going to be pushed out of there. They never lost all the money. They never, it never became about the rent, and just about, like, and as I said in the series, when I looked back on it through this project, I realized it wasn't about how rich they were. It was about the fact they didn't have to think about money, which every Black person in this country would be like, that's the dream. I don't care about rich, but just not always having to think about money. And so for me, and that means you can focus on your success and your excellence and the family stories of, like, Theo's shirt is ugly, not Theo got beat up by a gang or whatever. The typical stories would have been at that time.
Let's get to Do the Work, an Antiracist Activity Book. It's an interactive book. It's very different. It's you basically, this is kind of giving help to folks. You've got the separate but not equal crossword puzzle. I'm going to take a few of them at a time. Talk to me about the separate but not equal crossword puzzle.
I mean, to me, this book, the crossword puzzles is sort of where this book started, because it was like me and my friend Kate Schatz, who's the co-author, and she's a New York Times bestselling author for the Rad American Women series. And we both live in the Bay Area. We both have kids. That it was like in the wake of George Floyd's murder and all those other, and Breonna Taylor and Rashard Brooks and Ahmaud Arbery. And we saw many friends of ours, those anti-racist books shoot up to the top of the New York Times. We were like, people are going to buy those books, but are they going to read them? And when I say people, we're really talking about a certain type of white person who's like, I want to help.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah.
And so we were like, but really, how do we get them into the helping part? More than just whether or not you read the book, how do we get you into the action part?
Yeah.
And we were both in the middle of lockdown, sort of forcing our kids to do these brain quest books that are just activity guides for kids to keep their brains active.
Yeah.
And we sort of come to the conclusion, like, that's how you do it. So a crossword puzzle is a fun way to sort of separate from your troubles and forget about things and just sort of work your brain. But what if at the same time you're doing that, you're also learning about racism? You know what I mean? So that was that's sort of the key of like, how can we get people's brains working and sort of disconnect from their, I don't want to learn this stuff brain, and get to like, oh, it's fun to do a crossword puzzle. Oh my God, I'm learning about racism. How do we, and so the book is basically based on things like that.
A couple other ones just to talk about bootstrapping the game to understand the myth of meritocracy.
Yeah, so I mean, that's a lot has been made about especially when we were coming up, about lift yourself up by your bootstraps. And this is a game you can play with a friend where one person is starting on the side where you have bootstraps, and the other person is starting on the side where you don't have bootstraps, and sort of this dismantling the idea that everybody has bootstraps. Like, and I've heard this a lot recently. The funny thing about lift yourself up by your bootstraps, it was actually an expression created to say that's an impossible thing to do. Like, you can't, you literally, if your feet are in shoes, you can't lift yourself up. So it's an impossible scenario. So, but it's just about the idea of like dismantling these ideas that we sort of accept, like, why can't Black people just lift themselves up by their bootstraps? And you go, here's all the obstacles in the way of them even getting to the boots that then they can maybe lift themselves up by their bootstraps. So, and it's, again, it's fun, it's ridiculous, it's embedded with jokes because I'm a comedian and Kate's funny, but it's also like, but there's a real structural analysis being done there.
And how about Jim Crow versus Jim Foe?
So this is just again, this is all based on, like, we often talk about Highlights magazine.
Right, I think sure, of course. I'm in a dentist's office as a kid, yeah.
Exactly. And it's the idea of like, what is real and what's not real? Is this Jim Crow or is this Jim Foe? And the idea being that again, sort of like dismantling your, like, we're going to learn about Jim Crow, and sort of going, we're going to make it a game. So which of these things do you think actually existed in Jim Crow, and which of these things did not exist during Jim Crow? And spoiler alert, it's a trick question. So but it's just the idea to, again, like, to sort of like, and we have all these signs and laws and things to go, this, and all of them sound, hopefully to the rational person, to be, you would hope they all didn't exist. Yeah. But spoiler alert, it's a trick question.
It's such a smart premise for a book, beyond the subject matter, the way you did it, because it's so hard. Even today's interview, I'm like, okay, I'm talking about race, and I don't want to ask some dumb white guy question. And it's like it's. I know you and I would we would have the best dinner together and spend 3 hours, and then yet I was. And as I said, I talk on the air, and I'll often say dumb white guy question, because I'll preface it, whereas, like, I know I don't know what I don't know as much as I know. And that's kind of like what I love about this book and kind of the framing of the book,
Well, and I think this is, I feel like this way. Like, I'm professionally a lot of people's Black friend. Like, I have to sort of like, that's the career. As much as I wanted to be Eddie Murphy, I think the time has run out on that, but I do think that, like, I understand the lane I'm in. And there's an exercise in the book called Know Your Lane. Because, people say you stick to your lane. Well, it's like, okay, if you stick to your lane, what's actually in your lane? Because even in your lane, there are things you can do to create a less racist society. So even this interview is a version of that. Your lane is this podcast and many other things. So by bringing me in here, you're sort of like going, I'm going to use this to try to, like, to talk about anti-racism. So for me, the idea is, like, you have to know your pluses and your minuses. And you also, it is fine to sort of, I think, to me, I will be your Black friend in this book and in my career. So you don't go to the random Black person at work and expect them to explain Juneteenth to you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, like, I think that's the thing I feel like is the place I'm trying to take up, is like, these are, and also, if you know you have a dumb question, I think it's great to go, okay, I'm going to ask a dumb question. But then don't be surprised if you get an answer that's not satisfactory to you.
Yeah.
Don't be, and it's actually okay for somebody to go, I don't actually want to answer your dumb question right now because I've got other things to do.
As a comedian and as somebody who obviously throughout both in your comedy and everything you do, you focus on race. It's interesting. What is your take on, because comedy has gotten so much more complicated in this kind of new world, this, I don't want to call it political, post-Me Too, I don't have to lay out for you how comedy has changed and the minefields, the new minefields are there, some of the old minefields are not there. What's your reaction when you see Michael Che and Colin Jost do a bit on Saturday Night Live where basically Michael Che writes racist jokes for Colin Jost to say? He doesn't know what he's reading, and they are just as nasty and as fucking, I mean, they just go wherever, however low you can go, you can go. Are we moving forward or backwards with that stuff?
I mean, I think it's funny. People sometimes say comedy is you're going to get canceled for things you say. And I'm like, I feel like when people say that, it's like, oh, you don't actually pay that much attention to comedy. You're paying attention to headlines and things that are in the world, but you're not actually paying, because there are comedians who are saying the most foul things and building careers on that.
Yeah.
Or who are comedians who are claiming the space of, I'm going to say whatever I want to say, nobody can stop me. And whether I'm talking about like, and it doesn't have to be hateful things, whether I'm talking about Doug Stanhope, who's a stand-up comedy legend, or I'm talking about Andrew Schultz, who's a rising comedy star, or you're talking about like Colin Jost and Michael Chandler's Saturday Night Live. They are saying the jokes they want to say. And the difference between Colin Jost and say like, between like Doug Stanhope is that Colin Jost have to run those through NBC censors, and they probably sometimes are like, that's too far, guys. And then they have to choose, is this joke worth my job? And they probably choose, no, it's not worth my job. Whereas like there are still stand-up comedy comics around the country on stage who are and I'm not judging this, saying foul things, and people are laughing about it. It is still happening.
So my question to you, you have Saturday Night Live. I'm going to guess it's a 97% white audience. I don't know that. I don't have those facts, but certainly an overwhelming majority white audience. And you have Jost reading a line that Che wrote. It says, oh, there's a new black Superman, the Man of Steel, except they spell it Steal. And is that, and are we going backwards in a certain way? Because now you're playing to a stereotype, and I'm not an old fuddy-duddy. I laughed. I mean, whether that makes me a bad guy or not, I laughed out loud. And
it's basic. It's a wordplay joke. So it's not, So I don't think.
And I'm not asking you to put down or up. I mean, those are wonderful comedians. So that's not. I'm more asking philosophically in terms of comedy and how we work things out now in comedy about race.
I mean, I think that like the thing that I'm aware of is like my career did not exist. There was not a path for my career when I started in stand-up comedy, or when I started as a kid watching Eddie Murphy on SNL. He was the only black guy I saw. Yeah. Then Bill Cosby was on the couch. So there wasn't like a path for like, what if I want to go a different way? The thing that I think is not great now is you can go your own way. You can really chart your own path, and you can do it through the mainstream halls of show business like I do it. Or you can do it on TikTok if that's the way you want to do it. And you can actually make a life and a career from what I've seen on a lot of these things. And so I would say this, like the fact that there's more paths and more venues, and the fact that like somebody who sees that joke on SNL can tweet, I didn't like that joke. I mean, Michael Che has regularly almost had like Instagram press conferences about things that he said on SNL that people didn't like. And so the fact that people can be heard, I think is actually the thing that makes this feel better than it would otherwise. The fact that people have like, whole movements have been started by things people have tweeted just because they were like, I'm just tired of this thing. And so I really don't want to ever censor comedy. But I don't want comics to, I don't think saying I'm a comedian shields you from the things you say. It just means that you're saying them in a comedy context. Yeah. So but I'm not trying to censor comedy, but I'm also not trying to censor the voices of people who say, that's not my favorite type of comedy.
Little politics. Would we have had Donald Trump without Barack Obama? Or is Donald Trump the illegitimate son of Barack Obama?
Oh my God! Well, I'll let you get aggregated for that one. I definitely think Donald Trump is the backlash to Obama. Like I don't think if we had George, if we had George W. Bush and then John McCain, I don't think there's a real path. There's not the same path for Donald Trump. But the fact is that there clearly was a path, because many people, when Trump started running, were like, well, this is never going to happen. What we have learned is that it never is here. And so, I don't think it's going to happen, but there is a chance that the next senator out of Georgia is Herschel Walker.
Yeah, amazing. You can't write this stuff. As they say, the shit that goes on, you can't write. I mean, that stuff, if you're paying attention to the January 6th hearing, you can't write it. It would be, if they took it to you and you go, that's too broad. No, we can't have them grabbing the steering wheel and say, we can't have them throwing ketchup against the wall. Like, it's just, it's just, look.
I mean, talking about SNL, I think that's why they've sort of like, some of their political stuff isn't it? They go through sort of phases of it being like super hard hitting. And so like, I think the latest phase, it's like, it's hard to be harder hitting than what's going on.
Yeah.
It's hard to find an angle on January 6th that we didn't all take the minute it happened on Twitter. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think that like it is a challenge of professional comedians to really like, we have to raise our games pretty high, because as you said, the news seems like satire.
So many of my guests have a political bent, and I end up spending a fair amount of the podcast on politics. And I always ask people from their vantage point, explain Donald Trump, explain how this happened, explain how we as a country and explain even more so. I could explain first time around, people like, all right, maybe he's just saying things to get elected and Hillary's a terrible candidate. But 40% of the people still, after round one, said, yes, give me more. And my explanation is race, is that there is a huge part of it's two things. There's a huge part of this country that even if it's not like I hate people of color, but let's just keep things the way they are. They're getting a little too frothy about the thing. And I know people like that. I'm embarrassed to say that I have friends, they'll never come out and say anything, they're not going to use the N-word. They're not going to say they're not white supremacists. But yet, it's just things are okay the way they are. We don't need to kind of stir the pot a little bit. And I think that's the simple essence of Donald Trump, is racism is creating another. And what it could have been a Muslim, it could have been a brown person, but it's just the basic fundamentals of fascism throughout our time is find enough people unhappy with their lot in life and blame another. And that's Donald Trump. And that's Donald Trump.
And in America, there may be other people's turn to be the other, but the most popular other in that seat is black people. So I think that there certainly have been times when it has been Arabs and Muslims, and there's been times where it's been, and people from undocumented people from Mexico and below. But it's black people certainly are popular in that seat. I would say there's a part of this too that is that is sort of even just the way in which we elevate. We allegedly left, not we, I wasn't a part of this, but the Pilgrims left the British colony to get away from royalty. But we still in this country have managed to find royalty. And for the most part, that royalty means if you're a person who's rich, if we have a person who's rich, we just consider you to be a good person. And if you're a person who's rich, we consider if you're rich because you did one thing, we sort of then go, that means you must know everything. So I think about somebody like Elon Musk, where it's like...
You understand a lot of you see pictures of Elon Musk before his hair plugs and just like the ultimate geek on the spectrum,
Yeah, and also I think the idea being that we then go, oh, you must know everything. And so then he's like, I should buy Twitter. And it's like, no, you should, there's nothing about you that says you should be in charge of a major social media platform. But because you have money, we deem that there's people who go, he must be smart because he got all that money. When it's same thing with Ben Carson. No, you can be a genius surgeon, but that doesn't mean you know anything about housing and urban development, which he proved he didn't. So to me, it's I think we just have a tendency to turn celebrities into royalty. And then royalty feels like they should be your leader. And then there's also part of this that is the moment that Trump started to promote the Barack Obama may not have been born in Hawaii thing, as a media sphere, we should have sort of just put him aside. The entire media, instead of going, some people say Barack Obama was born in Hawaii. Some people say he wasn't. That to me was the beginning of the end. Instead of just going, anybody who says that, we turn the microphones off on.
My birther story is I had been friendly with Donald Trump in the way that only people you could be friendly in New York, which means you did business with him. Interact with him. You always knew you didn't want to be in a foxhole with him, but you thought he was a lounge act and maybe he was in on the joke. And so the birther thing came out, and I went on. I think it was The View, and really came down hard. And he basically called me. Michael Cohen called me and said, Donald is very, very, very hurt. He thought you were his friend. I said, well, he was my friend. That's racist what he said, And we get on the phone, and he like a child, like a 7-year-old goes, Donnie, I thought you were my friend. I'm like, Donald, I haven't determined that you're a racist. What you did was very racist. And I don't know how else to say it. That was the end of our friendship, basically. But that always, whenever I hear birther and I hear that, it just always creeps in my head.
To me, that the fact that only in a society that promotes rich white men's voices over everybody else, does he get away with that? Yeah. I don't think there's any way that any black person could have said, John McCain was born in Panama, I think it was, so therefore he's not a citizen. Maybe we can't. It wouldn't have gotten any traction, but because the media promotes celebrity, rich, white, male voices overall. The fact that Obama had to show his birth certificate at some point just to that was the point at which Trump won. And that's the point he probably thought, I can take this all the way to the White House.
And he did. Just quickly, any particular episodes this season on shades that jump out? I know I mentioned the first one as far as any ones that I think you did 7 of them. Any one that really jumps out that you'd like to talk about?
I mean, I'm really excited about. We did an episode during Standing Rock. We did an episode during Standing Rock talking about the Native American activism around that. And now since then, there's a movement that has emerged called the Land Back movement some Native American activists saying we want the land back. We're not tired. We're tired of sort of being pushed off into our corner of the land. And I know it's going to be a very hard and controversial subject for people to watch, but it's also a very beautiful episode. And I think people will be surprised to hear how the Native American activists in that episode talk about it.
Cool. 2 last questions. First one, why'd you bail out of Penn? I mean, where'd you live there where'd you live freshman year, by the way?
The Quad.
The Quad. Do you remember the place in the Quad you lived? Do you remember the name of it?
What was it? Something Speakman? What was it called?
That was it. It was called Speakman. That was it. There
Speakman,
you go.
Yeah.
Because Penn is one of those places it's hard not to love Penn. You know, you got a city there. You got everything for everybody.
It's I was like, I want a major city with not a giant school, with a big school and campus. And so, my roommate's name was Omar. I haven't talked to him since. Shout out Omar, wherever you are. Still in touch with some of the people I was there with. That was where I decided I was really going to pursue stand-up comedy, because when I dropped out, I had weeks of just sitting around doing nothing.
So why'd you drop out? Why'd you drop out?
But, I think Penn is great, but I think I needed a school that was less pre-professional and more like rounded liberal arts. I think if I had known about Reed College or Oberlin, I just needed a place where it's make your own grades. I think I needed a place that was more
I could have found it. All right, last question. The premise of the show is kind of everybody and everything is a brand today. Not to minimize anything, but every company, every person, everything. Sure. And I ask everybody, what's your brand? And so what's the W. Kamau Bell brand? Now, maybe you have it in the title of one of your books as your brand. I don't know.
That's what that is part of my brand. But I think at this point, I would say it's about becoming better anti-racists. It's about always seeking inclusion. And it's also about it's better to be smarter.
Hear you. What a privilege to talk to you. I wish you would come over to me at the restaurant and said hi on Long Island Italian. It was either Matteo's or it could have been Ginestra, La Ginestra.
It was it was like a restaurant where it was it's not white on the inside, but very a big dining room.
Yeah.
With
some fucking Long Island restaurant.
Yeah, I'll ask the producer. He'll remember because he knew where we were going. He's like, I know where we're going. And I just didn't. Yeah.
The new season is of United Shades of America is out on CNN. You must catch it. And the new book is Do the Work, an Antiracist Activity Book, a kind of interactive way to kind of move the needle along a little bit. My friend, thank you, and continued all your great work. We need it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, man. Thanks for listening to On Brand with Donny Deutsch. Rate, review, and subscribe anywhere you get those podcasts. That could be Apple, it could be Spotify, anywhere. Just go online and listen to On Brand with Donny Deutsch. And also, you can watch our videos on YouTube. Download the videos, take a look, and remember to subscribe and leave your comments about our videos also. We love having you watch us. We love having you listen to us. And we love that you're part of On Brand. We'll see you next week on On Brand. Everybody, thanks for watching. If you like it, hit that subscribe button. And we love having you here watching On Brand. And just don't miss any future episodes. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We'll see you next time.